wanted some of Finland to complete the Soviet domination of the Baltic Sea. Diplomacy failed to persuade the Finns to sacrifice their independence, so Comrade Stalin took a leaf from Hitler's book. He matched the Soviet army of 15 millions against Finland's 30,000.
In 1939, the Winter War occurred in the frostbitten wilderness of Finland. It was a battle between Finland and the Soviet Union. The Finnish soldiers, although significantly outnumbered by the Soviet soldiers, won the battle. Furthermore, something massacred a significant portion of the Soviet soldiers, and that left more questions than bodies. How did this massacre happen? What carried out the massacre? Join us as we explore the details of the Soviet division that was massacred by something unknown in Finland during 1939. The Winter War. The Winter War was a conflict that erupted between the Soviet Union and Finland in November 1939. It stands as a stark testament to the resilience of a nation outmatched in numbers yet unyielding in spirit. This confrontation was beyond a battle over territory. It was also a clash of ideologies and wills set against the chilling backdrop of the Finn winter. The tensions leading to the Winter War were rooted in the geopolitical aftermath of World War I and the Russian Civil War. In 1917, Finland had gained its independence from Russia, but the Soviet Union under Joseph Stalin sought to reclaim lost territories and create a buffer zone against potential invasions. The Soviet demands for Finnish territory, particularly the Karelian Isthmus near Leningrad, were met with firm resistance by the Finnish government. On November 30th, 1939, the conflict was ignited when the Soviet Union launched a full-scale invasion of Finland, following a shelling incident at Manila, which the Soviets used as a casus belli. The world was quick to condemn the Soviet aggression, yet Finland stood almost alone against the Red Army's might. With a Soviet force numbering over 500,000 men, the Finns were heavily outnumbered, possessing only a fraction of the soldiers and even fewer resources. Despite the disparity in strength, the Finnish forces under the command of General Carl Gustaf Emil Mannheim mounted a formidable defense. Utilizing their intimate knowledge of the terrain, the Finns employed guerrilla tactics and strategic withdrawals to their advantage. The Mannerheim Line, a series of fortifications along the Karelian Isthmus, became a symbol of Finnish resistance. The harsh winter conditions further played into Finnish hands, with temperatures plummeting to as low as 40 Baadi, which significantly hampered the Soviet advance. The Red Army, though superior in numbers and equipment, was not prepared for the extreme cold and the dense forests and swamps that characterized the Finn landscape. Soviet tactics, heavily reliant on large conventional formations and direct assaults, proved ineffective against the mobile and elusive Finnish units. In addition, the purges of the 1930s had decimated the Soviet officer corps, leaving the Red Army with a leadership deficit that critically impacted its operational capabilities. The Winter War drew international attention to Finland, garnering sympathy and support from various countries. Although material aid from France, the United Kingdom, and the United States was limited, it bolstered the Finnish resolve. Volunteers from across Scandinavia and other parts of the world joined the Finnish ranks, although the most significant assistance came in the form of weapons and ammunition. On March 12, 1940, the conflict reached its conclusion with the signing of the Moscow Peace Treaty. Finland was forced to cede 11% of its territory to the Soviet Union, including the entire Karelian Isthmus and parts of Salla and Petsamo. Despite the territorial losses, Finland preserved its independence and demonstrated to the world the potential for a smaller nation to resist a larger aggressor. The war left an indelible mark on Finnish and Soviet military history, influencing tactics, strategy, and international perceptions. For Finland, the war fostered a sense of national unity and resilience embodied in the term sisu, a unique Finnish concept denoting extraordinary determination and grit. On the Soviet side, the embarrassing performance of the Red Army led to significant military reforms that would have implications for its effectiveness in World War II. How exactly did the war occur on the Finnish land? Let us delve into the details. The event, a night of horror. One fateful night in 1939, the eerie silence of the Finnish forests was shattered as a Soviet division stationed near the border fell victim to a harrowing ordeal that would leave an indelible mark on the annals of military history. This chapter delves into the night of horror when an entire Soviet unit was decimated under mysterious circumstances, an event that remains shrouded in uncertainty and speculation. The Soviet division, part of the massive force invading Finland during the Winter War, had advanced into Finnish territory with the confidence befitting one of the world's largest military powers. Their mission was straightforward: to secure strategic positions and crush Finnish resistance. However, the harsh Finn winter and the dense, shadowy forests presented unforeseen challenges, turning the environment into as much an adversary as the Finnish defenders themselves. On this particular night, the division had set up camp in a dense woodland area, confident in their numbers and the might of the Red Army. The soldiers, already grappling with the biting cold and dwindling supplies, were unaware that they were about to face an ordeal far removed from the conventional warfare they were trained for. As night enveloped the forest, a palpable sense of unease began to pervade the camp. Initially dismissed as the jitters by the commanding officers, the apprehension soon escalated into terror. Surviving accounts pieced together from scattered reports and second-hand testimonies speak of a sudden and violent onslaught that struck without warning. The assailants, described only as something unknown, descended upon the camp with ferocity. Witnesses spoke of shadows moving with unnatural speed, of screams that cut through the night, and of a force so overwhelming that it seemed to embody the very essence of the wintry forest's malice. The Soviet soldiers trained for battle against a human enemy found themselves utterly unprepared for the chaos that ensued. Attempts to organize a defense were futile. The enemy, if it could be called that, was neither seen clearly nor understood. The darkness of the night, compounded by the dense forest, played to the attackers' advantage, making it impossible to ascertain the nature of the threat. When dawn broke, the extent of the massacre became apparent. The campsite was a scene of carnage, with tents torn apart and equipment scattered amidst the snow-stained dark with blood. The bodies of Soviet soldiers were found in disarray, some mutilated beyond recognition, others bearing no visible injuries yet lying lifeless in the snow. The immediate assumption was an attack by Finnish forces utilizing guerrilla tactics to devastating effect. However, this theory was quickly questioned. The nature of the injuries, the lack of any defensive wounds, and the absence of facts or evidence of a large attacking force confounded military analysts and investigators. Speculations abounded, with some suggesting the involvement of supernatural forces, citing local folklore of malevolent spirits and creatures said to inhabit the Finnish forests. Others theorized a psychological operation by the Finns designed to sow terror within the Soviet ranks. However, the lack of concrete evidence and the sheer scale of the massacre made any definitive explanation elusive. In the days that followed, a Soviet military investigation sought to uncover the truth behind the night's events. Expectedly, the inquiry faced numerous obstacles, including the reluctance of the surviving soldiers. Many of them were so traumatized by the experience that they were unable to provide coherent accounts. The Finnish side, for their part, denied any involvement in the incident, suggesting instead that the Soviets had fallen victim to their paranoia and the harsh environmental conditions. Although plausible, given the circumstances of the Winter War, this explanation did little to address the specifics of the massacre or the evidence of violence that suggested a deliberate attack. Eyewitness accounts and Soviet records. The mysterious massacre of a Soviet division in the Finnish forests during the Winter War of 1939 remains one of the conflict's most mysterious episodes. Although sparse and often shrouded in secrecy, eyewitness accounts and Soviet military archives provide a fragmented glimpse into the events of that fateful night. This chapter seeks to piece together the narrative from the fragments available, shedding light on the testimonies of those who witnessed the horror firsthand and what the official records might suggest. The few surviving eyewitnesses from the division spoke of a night filled with inexplicable terror. While varied and sometimes contradictory, their accounts share a common thread of confusion, fear, and encounters with an unseen adversary. Soldiers described hearing unsettling noises in the dark, whispers that seemed to come from nowhere and everywhere at once, and sudden chilling screams that pierced the cold night air. One testimony recounted how the air seemed to thicken, making it difficult to breathe or move as panic set in. Another spoke of seeing shapes moving at the edge of the campfire light, too fast and fluid to be human, yet too deliberate in their movements to be dismissed as mere shadows or the wind through the trees. The survivors spoke of a sense of dread so profound that it felt almost tangible, a presence that enveloped the camp and its inhabitants in a suffocating embrace. The Soviet military archives regarding the incident are notably scant and significantly redacted, reflecting the official desire to suppress information deemed harmful to morale, or that could be construed as a failing on the part of the Red Army. What little information can be gleaned from these records suggests a rapid and thorough investigation by the Soviet authorities. Although the conclusions drawn remain classified or are simply missing from the public record, the archives briefly mention the division's deployment and its mission objectives, followed by a sudden and unexplained break in communication. Subsequent entries speak in vague terms of a tragic loss and unforeseen circumstances with no detailed account of the event. There is a notable absence of any official acknowledgement of enemy engagement, which aligns with the lack of concrete evidence pointing to a finished military attack. The discrepancies between the eyewitness accounts and the sparse details from Soviet records have fueled speculation and theories about what truly happened. Some researchers suggest that the official Soviet response was an attempt to cover up an encounter with something beyond the understanding or control of the military leadership, possibly to avoid undermining the perceived invincibility of the Red Army. Others argue that the inconsistencies and lack of detail may be attributable to the chaos of war and the subsequent desire to forget or move past an unexplainable tragedy. The fact that the incident was not widely reported or acknowledged in Soviet military history has led to suggestions that it was considered an embarrassment, a blemish on the record of the Red Army that was best left unexamined. The role of censorship and propaganda in shaping the narrative cannot be understated. Particularly under Stalin's regime, the Soviet Union was notorious for its control over information and its efforts to craft a narrative of strength and infallibility. Therefore, it is possible that any records or testimonies that contradicted the official line were suppressed or altered to fit the desired image. This manipulation of information extends to the accounts of the survivors themselves, who may have been coerced into silence or persuaded to alter their stories to match the official version of events. The fear of reprisal combined with the trauma of the experience may have led many to withhold information or to speak only in terms that would not invite further scrutiny. Investigating the unknown, theories, and explanations. In the aftermath of the harrowing massacre of a Soviet division in the dense forests of Finland during the Winter War, a multitude of theories have emerged in an attempt to explain the inexplicable. From the plausible to the fantastical, each theory seeks to provide an answer to the question that has lingered since that fateful night, which is, what force was capable of annihilating an entire military unit under such mysterious circumstances? One of the more grounded theories suggests that the division fell victim to a pack of wolves or other predatory animals. The harsh Finn winter could have driven wildlife to desperation, leading them to attack the soldiers. Proponents of this theory point to the mutilation of the bodies as evidence of animal predation. However, skeptics argued that the Soviet soldiers were well armed and trained, making it unlikely that even a large number of predators could have inflicted such catastrophic losses without significant evidence of a fight. Another theory posits that extreme weather conditions may have played a pivotal role in the soldiers' demise. Hypothermia, disorientation, and even hallucinations brought on by the severe cold could have led to panic and chaos within the camp, resulting in a tragic case of mass hysteria and self-inflicted casualties. While environmental factors undoubtedly contributed to the hardships faced by the Soviet forces during the Winter War, the specific nature of the injuries and the scene of devastation suggest an external cause of death beyond the cold. The possibility of a covert Finnish military operation designed to sow fear and confusion among Soviet ranks has also been considered. This theory suggests that the Finns, adept in guerrilla warfare and intimately familiar with the terrain, executed a surprise attack on the Soviet division using psychological warfare tactics, including mimicking animal sounds or exploiting local folklore. They could have induced terror among the soldiers, leading to a breakdown of order. Although intriguing, this theory also lacks concrete evidence, and Finnish military records from the period do not validate the existence of such an operation. In the realm of more speculative explanations, some have suggested the involvement of supernatural entities, drawing on Finnish folklore that speaks of spirits and creatures haunting the forests. Tales of the Holdra. A seductive forest spirit and other mythical beings have been woven into the narrative, proposing that the soldiers encountered forces beyond human comprehension. Although captivating, this theory is not supported by physical evidence and is largely dismissed by historians. However, it underscores the depth of the mystery and the human tendency to seek explanations in the unknown. A more psychological explanation theorizes that the combination of extreme stress, isolation, and fear led to a situation of mass hysteria among the troops. Theories suggest that stories of Finnish supernatural warfare tactics might have circulated among the Soviet soldiers, priming them for a psychological break. This state of heightened anxiety could have culminated in a tragic spiral of fear-induced violence, where soldiers turned on each other in a frenzy of paranoia and confusion. Another line of inquiry points to the potential use of chemical or biological agents, either as a result of Soviet mishandling or a deliberate attack by the Finns. The theory suggests that exposure to a toxic substance could have led to the disorientation and subsequent demise of the troops. However, there is no historical evidence to suggest that such weapons were deployed by either side during the Winter War, making this theory less plausible. Similar historical mysteries. The annals of military history are rife with mysterious events that have left historians puzzled and enthusiasts captivated, much like the massacre of the Soviet division in Finland. These incidents occur in various contexts and eras, share a common thread of mystery in the unknown, challenging people's understanding of what happened and why. Possibly one of the most famous mysteries in Soviet history, the Dyatlov Pass incident involved the unexplained demise of 9 hikers in the northern Ural Mountains, much like the soldiers in Finland. The hikers were found dead under mysterious circumstances, with their bodies displaying a range of injuries from minor to fatal, none of which could be fully explained by investigators. Theories about their deaths have ranged from avalanches and infrasound-induced panic to more speculative explanations involving military tests and unidentified flying objects. The lack of conclusive evidence has allowed the Dyatlov Pass incident to remain a source of speculation and intrigue. In the early stages of World War II, residents of Los Angeles were awoken by air raid sirens and anti-aircraft gunfire aimed at what was believed to be an enemy attack. However, no enemy aircraft were ever identified, and the source of the aerial threat remains unknown. Dubbed the Battle of Los Angeles, this event bears similarities to the Finnish forest massacre in its suddenness and the confusion that ensued, with explanations ranging from a false alarm due to war nerves to more outlandish theories involving extraterrestrial spacecraft. The Bermuda Triangle, a region in the western part of the North Atlantic Ocean, is infamous for the mysterious disappearance of ships and aircraft. Among these, the disappearance of Flight 19, a group of 5 U.S. Navy bombers on a training flight in 1945, stands out. The aircraft vanished without a trace, along with a rescue plane sent to search for them. This led to speculation about the triangle's purportedly supernatural properties. Although not a massacre, the incident echoes the themes of unexplained loss and the limits of human understanding in the face of the unknown. During World War I, stories emerged of angelic figures appearing over the British soldiers at the Battle of Mons, allegedly protecting them from the advancing German forces. Although later attributed to a combination of folklore, religious imagery, and the psychological strain experienced by the troops, the Angels of Man's story shares elements with the Finnish incident in its blend of warfare, mystery, and the supernatural. It represents another example of how extraordinary circumstances can give rise to tales of otherworldly intervention. While not a mystery in the traditional sense, the story of the Ghost Army, an Allied unit tasked with deceiving German forces through the use of inflatable tanks, fake radio transmissions, and other forms of subterfuge, illustrates the power of psychological warfare. Similar to the theories surrounding the Finnish operation, the Ghost Army used misdirection and illusion to achieve military objectives, highlighting the role that deception and the unknown can play in the dynamics of conflict. Psychological warfare, fear and superstition in military conflicts. Psychological warfare, an ancient facet of conflict, seeks to undermine an enemy's morale and will to fight without engaging in physical combat. The use of fear, superstition, and folklore as tools in this endeavor has been well documented across various military conflicts, including the chilling events surrounding the massacre of a Soviet division in the Finnish forests during the Winter War. This chapter explores how psychological tactics, amplified by the inherent superstitious nature of soldiers, might have played a pivotal role in the unfolding of those mysterious events. Psychological warfare aims to exploit vulnerabilities in the human psyche, leveraging fear and uncertainty to sow discord and fear among enemy ranks. In the context of the Winter War, the isolated and harsh environment of the Finnish forests provided a fertile ground for such tactics. The Finns, vastly outnumbered, resorted to ingenious methods to compensate for their lack of manpower and resources, one of which was leveraging the psychological impact of the unfamiliar and eerie landscape. On the Soviet troops, soldiers facing the daily possibility of death often turned to superstitions and rituals for comfort and a sense of control over their fate. The Soviet soldiers, many of whom hailed from diverse backgrounds across the vast Soviet Union, brought with them a tapestry of beliefs and superstitions. The introduction of local Finnish folklore into this already potent mix of fears and beliefs could have exacerbated the psychological strain on the troops, making them more susceptible to panic and irrational behavior. Finnish folklore is rich with tales of spirits and creatures inhabiting the forests, tales that were likely well known to the local population, but alien and potentially terrifying to the invading Soviet soldiers. The possibility that the Finns deliberately spread rumors or staged events to invoke these folkloric beings should not be underestimated. Such tactics could have been designed to exploit the superstitions of the Soviet soldiers, amplifying their fears of the unknown and the supernatural, thereby undermining their morale. The dense forests of Finland, with their limited visibility and the constant presence of natural sounds that could be misconstrued as threats, created an environment ripe for psychological manipulation. Isolation from familiar surroundings and the breakdown of regular communication channels can lead to a heightened state of anxiety and paranoia, making soldiers more receptive to rumors and fearful imaginings. In such a setting, the line between reality and superstition can blur, making psychological warfare more effective. The use of psychological warfare and the manipulation of superstition and folklore have historical precedents. For instance, during World War II, the Allies used ghost soldiers and inflatable tanks as part of Operation Quirks to create the illusion of a large force preparing to invade northern France, deceiving German reconnaissance. While materially different from invoking folkloric fears, the underlying principle of exploiting the enemy's psychological vulnerabilities remains the same. The aftermath of the massacre, with its lack of conclusive evidence and the mysterious circumstances surrounding the deaths, only served to deepen the psychological impact on Soviet forces in Finland. The rumors and stories that emerged from the incident likely had a lasting effect on the morale of Soviet groups, contributing to the folklore and mystique of the Finnish forests. This legacy underscores the power of psychological tactics and the enduring impact of fear and superstition on the human psyche in the context of military conflicts. Thank you for watching. Check out another interesting video by clicking on the link appearing on your screen right now. See you on the other side.